Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge and another technically perfect launch of the best produced show on the internet. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and this is the 16th of January, 2020. I still wake up and press my face against the glass, hoping that the postman is going to come and deliver my jetpack, but so far, nothing. It's really pretty depressing if you really want to know. Doing pretty well otherwise. I hope everybody's doing well. Got a bunch of cool things to talk about. Then we'll take some questions and some questions from our Facebook, as well as from our member-only page. So that's that. Couple of things here. Hang on. There we go. That are kind of interesting and fun. First of all, I realized as I was setting up for the show tonight that I forgot to strip the sound out of the last one, so I'll try and do both of those this evening because of reasons. And a special friend too. Hello to our friend Dave Big Booty and all the rest of the gang here, everybody who's in the comment section, and those of you and all the ships at sea. So just a couple things real quick. First of all, despite the fact that I've been working like a fiend on this Cold War thing for 4 or 5 months now, which I'll get to in a minute, in the vast amount of time I have between that and doing 11 shows a week and all the rest of it, I was able to slowly move forward on some of this this animation stuff for these science fiction videos that we're going to piggyback on top of Star Citizen. I had to put them away for 18 months because just couldn't run them any longer. We're just running out of company. I was just neglected it for too long. But made some real progress recently. Here, kind of by myself. There's just to give you an idea of what's been happening. I have a program called DAZ 3D, and it's a character generator, and it's a really good character generator. The problem is at the end is that the particular software has no animation abilities whatsoever. I mean, technically it does, but it's designed for people to do still pictures. And when you look at most of the horror that's on DAZ and the photos that come out of it, I mean, I don't know who's this for. It looks like the kind of thing that my Aunt Marty might have gotten interested in, to do little poses of, couples on the beach or whatever. Most of it is just such dreck. But having looked around extensively, there was nothing I could find that was even close to it in terms of making believable characters. Not necessarily photorealistic, but close enough. Close enough certainly for me to be happy with what I want to do. So I made a bunch of characters in DAZ, and we all saw those when I stopped about a year ago. Stopped working on this stuff because I just couldn't do it. More than that, year and a half almost now. And my problem was I'd make these awesome characters in DAZ 3D. I just genuinely loved them. I loved them. I thought they were great. Here's an example, although this is a pretty old version of Boyd. But this is the kind of thing that I can do in DAZ. And I think these characters look great. I think they look absolutely fantastic. If I could get these guys animated and moving, I'd be a happy camper. But the happiness of this camper has been severely impacted by the fact that while this software allows me to make these great characters, I could not get them exported. I could not. I spent the first 18 months working on this, trying to figure out how I was going to do this. Was I going to send them to Maya, animated in Maya, what a 3D Studio, back and forth. And finally, I realized that the only way to do these things within any kind of a reasonable framework was to render them, to send them over to a game engine and do them live in the game engine. So, or at least close to live. So those days and days and days and days and days of rendering in 3D Studio or rendering some of these files in DAZ gone. Game Engine is just astonishing what it'll do, mostly with textures replacing geometry, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, the problem I had in terms of not making any progress with this was I had these characters I liked. I went looking for characters that you could just drop into Unreal Engine. And I mean, when I went looking, I mean, I ran out of internet. There was nothing else I could find. I spent 6, 7, 8, well, I spent more than that. I spent a year and a half looking for characters that I thought were as good as what I wanted to do. And I couldn't find any. So the problem was getting these characters from out of DAZ and into Unreal. And for the longest time, it was just not possible. Now, there was software called iClone by Real Illusion. They're the same guys that do the voice over IP, the face over IP, the same people that allowed you to do just take a webcam and move your facial things onto a character inside Star Citizen. And I did a couple of test videos here about a year ago now, I guess. And it just wasn't enough. There wasn't enough resolution in the face. And even though it's very impressive for a game, you can't get the nuance that I needed to tell stories. You can get enough to tell like battle scenes and things like that, but if you really want to tell a story, you've got to be able to read emotion. Otherwise, you end up telling people things, and it's not about telling people. It's about showing people, and that means that these digital characters have to be able to deliver a performance, and just wasn't there in the game. And I looked at some of these iClone characters, and I thought they were just really not impressive at all. But I could not get from DAZ into Unreal Engine. But a year and a half went by, and then I took a look again, and iClone had come out, Real Illusion rather, had come out with a new version of their character creator, which had like a digital human shading for the skin, and it looked a lot better. And they had simplified an awful lot the export procedures and import procedures and all the rest of it. I won't bore you with all the details, but in any event, I want to say about 3-4 weeks ago, I was actually able to get 5-6 weeks ago, I was able to get a DAZ character into iClone, but I couldn't get the character to look the same. The morphs on the face weren't coming in. They were coming into 3D Exchange, but they weren't coming into what I needed. Anyway, it was one checkbox that I'd missed, and I took a long time to do it, but here's where we are now. As of 2 days ago, I finally got a character out of DAZ into character creator. That turns it into a Real Illusion iClone character, exported that to iClone, did some animation in iClone, and then iClone sets up a link that goes directly to Unreal in real time. So you split your screen in half, and on one side you're seeing the animation in iClone, and it's directly porting that over to Unreal, where you get to see everything else. So you do the animations and maybe move the lights in iClone, but you let the game engine, because iClone has, I think, probably easier animation tools, and then you let the game engine do the rest. And all of the things that are available to the game engine, the entire planetscapes and sets, hundreds and hundreds of things like, I don't know, probably 30 science fiction sets, world builders. You just get all these different platforms to start building them. Now that's a level builder thing, and I'm not a level builder, although I know what I want, so it's going to take me a while to do that too. But nevertheless, anyway, finally, I was able to get a character doing the facial animation. Now, it exported using the morphs from DAZ. I know I'm going a little into the weeds here, but, we often go over the same ground, and sometimes it likes to go about something new. So basically what happens is you've got a mesh of this character's face, and I think I showed you before the pretty much final look on this guy that I really think is where I want to stay. I'm going to grab it someplace. It's in here somewhere. Doesn't matter. Nope, hang on. So So basically, my problem was to get. Here we go. Yeah, we showed you these a couple weeks ago, but I'll show them to you again. I'll just show you one. So my problem then became, how do I get this into, wait, that's kind of scary, actually. Hey, it's me. How's it going? Could probably do a little better than that. Hang on a second. Yeah, so the problem was to get this level of realism. I'm very happy with. I can certainly live with that. And this is kind of the character that I'm going to be talking with from now on. So I'll just do Stratosphere Lounge kind of like this from now on. Anyway, I had to get that over to UE4, which I was able to do. And I was able to animate the face. Oops, hang on. But I'll just be the two of us here for the time being. But if you look at that expression on the character's face, it's made possible by something called morphs. In other words, the character's face is a 3D mesh, and it's got a neutral expression, and then you can drop and drag expressions to put on there, which morphs the head. It changes the shape of the lips and the smile and the mouth, the eyes, and all of that. So that's how you get the expressions on there through these morphs. And Daz exports these morphs, and those morphs then get changed into Character Creator, and then they get sent to Unreal. But the problem is, the problem is that the morphs that Daz exports are kind of, they're really the morphs that Real Illusion, the iClone people, import. The morphs are not very good. They're kind of generic, so you get smiles that are kind of, and just weirdness. So the next step is I have to take this 3D mesh character, which I like an awful lot, and then I have to send him to a company named Polywink. And Polywink is going to make very detailed morphs, because when I do the facial capture, what I'm really doing is I'm sending a series of signals to iClone or Unreal, and I'm telling them by the position of my face at any given time, what morphs can you find? What morphs? If, in other words, if I smile, it's going to try and match my face to the closest morphs that it has, and so on. So anyway, the more detailed the morphs, the more what's the word I'm looking for? The more faithful. The more faithful the expressions are. So I'm going to have to send this off to some people, have them do the custom morphs, and at that point, then I will be able to really get actual expressions on this dude, which makes me very, very happy. So I think I can see it from here. And this entire process, if you want to know what it's like, this entire process is having a croquet ball on the ground and thinking that you could just tap it and have it go in through the wickets, but you find out that this croquet ball, on the grass, and the croquet ball weighs 40,000 tons. And instead of the ball just rolling along, you have to take a sledgehammer, this is what it feels like doing the work I've been doing, and hit it with all you've got. And if you put all of your effort into it, you might move it half an inch. So bang, 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 bang. I just, God almighty, anyway, it's actually starting to work. So that is promising. Not be able to get into it for another 3 weeks yet, but then the great BillWhittle.com writing desert or drought, whatever you prefer, will come to an end, because in 2-3 weeks, 4 at the top, I'll be finished with the Cold War thing. 12 episodes. I'm wrapping up episode 10 now. And I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, because not only is it fun to talk to you guys about this, I get great feedback, and a lot of times when you explain something, you make it clearer for yourself in explaining it. And so the last script, which I turned in last Friday, which was the one about Project Azorian and the SR-71, 812, and It's called Cloaks and Daggers. It was about all the espionage during the Cold War. I think it's the best script in the series. I love it. I love it. Recording that tomorrow. So that got me on and off through the early 70s. And at some point, you have to get off the linear thing. So I've got 3 episodes left, 10, 11, and 12. And I have to go from really, I mean, the granularity going from 1948 to about 1965 was very fine. And I found myself like, I'm out of scripts, and I've got so much to do. So I had a pretty good feeling that obviously the Vietnam War has to be covered, but covering the Vietnam War is tricky because it alone is such an astonishingly detailed thing. Unlike the Korean War, which I covered in episode 3 or 4 or something. There's just so much written about Vietnam, and I only have a chance to kind of dip a couple toes in the water and then move on. And so I was trying to find a way to organize this. And when I say organize it, not just organize it in terms of structure, but organize it in terms of theme. And I've made a distinct effort to make sure that I don't call these things like the Korean War or the Berlin. I don't want anything that's just too on the nose. The Bay of Pigs episode I called Playa Hidron, which was the beach where they went ashore. Anyway, I had to think of something for this period. Now, here's the part I'm actually interested in getting some feedback on. I was going to call the Vietnam episode Welcome to the Suck. And that's a term that was used when a bunch of FNGs would get off the big silver bird from the world, and they'd land in Vietnam, and they'd realize, man, here we are, and they'd find themselves out in the bush somewhere in the jungle. And anytime anybody looked around with that look like, what the hell's going on here, it was pretty common to say, welcome to the suck. And so episode 10 is called Welcome to the Suck. And then I had this kind of idea. Because, and I mean, I had this idea half an hour ago. I have to cover more ground than Vietnam. Vietnam ended, really, the shooting ended in 72. By the time the Democrats lost the peace, it was 74. And I got to move. I got to cover the Vietnam War, and I got to go further. In fact, next episode 11, is called The Liberators, and that starts with Reagan and Thatcher and Pope John Paul II and all the rest of it. So I got to cover some ground here, and I got to cover ground after Vietnam. And then I realized, because this part of the Cold War I was around for, I realized that the suck is not so much a place. The suck, in my analysis now, was a period of time. Because I start this episode off by talking about something that my friend in Norway had told me a story when he was in UDT, underwater demolition teams, before they became the SEALs. Told me a story that was just incredible. So I open with this story of what these two divers experienced. And then I say, I'll just read it. I love reading it every now and then. So here we go. So this is where I was going with the episode. So this is kind of the transition thing. This was the Cold War II, dark and dangerous. Alone or in pairs, men would swim for miles through the ink-black darkness or lie breathless as a line of enemy troops stomped through the heavy bush just a few feet away. The Cold War was fought deep in the bowels of unglamorous, unromantic supply ships, with men peeling potatoes in sweltering galleys that could reach 110 degrees with 100% humidity. The Cold War was fought in parkas and heavy mittens at remote radar installations on the frozen Canadian wilderness. It was fought in dark basements littered with cigarette butts and styrofoam coffee cups by analysts who listened with mind-numbing boredom for an enemy transition worth intercepting. It was fought in Quonset huts with typewriters by quartermasters who had to feed, house, and then move tens of thousands of men. And it was fought in recruiting offices, often by hardened former warriors who now commanded desks instead of fire bases and had to defend themselves not from incoming enemy fire, but rather the spit and insults from their fellow American citizens. The term was coined in Vietnam, but it applied equally well to any FNG just getting off of one of those just starting on one of those dirty, thankless jobs that were faithfully carried out for 40 years. Welcome to the suck, kid. So I'll just read the next paragraph, and if the lawsuit comes from them, then it comes. What can I do? Because this is the thing this is kind of this insight I had. Then this is the theory. It says the suck wasn't limited to where you were stationed. In fact, the suck wasn't strictly confined to Vietnam. In my opinion, looking back at all of it, it seems to me that the suck was a specific period of time that began in 1964 and ended in 1980. Now, that doesn't mean that everything between 1964 and 1980 was part of the suck. On the contrary, the biggest and best part of the space race was, in fact, the period when the biggest and best part of the space race took place during the suck, including the flight of Apollo 11 in 1969. The space race was, in fact, the period when the vague, gauze-like sequence of events called the Cold War came into sharpest focus. The space race was its own self-contained story, which I covered in 4.5-hour detail right here on Esoteric Radio Theater in the series Apollo 11, What We Saw. The link is in the description below. But here's the point. But putting that aside, perhaps the best way to think about the suck was that it marked a break between Cold War I, where most of the interesting stuff occurred, and Cold War II, which began at the end of the suck in 1980. Much of what I'm calling the suck took place in Vietnam, but much of it took place after Vietnam as well. The suck was a worldwide phenomenon, and if we're going to put another milestone down to make some sense out of this 42-year conflict, then I maintain that the suck started on August 2nd, 1964. You could ask most people on the street, in fact, virtually anybody on the street, what happened on August 2nd, 1964, and most of them will look at you in amazement, but this audience is going to give me 15 different replies of what happened in August 2nd, 1964. And because there's an 8 or 10 second delay between when I record this and when I see the replies in the live stream here on Twitch, I sometimes have to wait for that. But anyway, yes, here they come. Here they come. Bing, ding, 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 ding. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution, based on the Gulf of Tonkin event, where Vietnamese torpedo boats came out to USS Haddocks, was it? I think I'm looking at it. And as a result of this encounter, Johnson was given all kinds of powers to escalate the Vietnam War. Now, a lot of people say that, that the Vietnam War was a tragic mistake and so on, and it was a catastrophe. It certainly didn't go the way it should have gone, but nobody knows what would have happened if it hadn't been fought. This idea of domino theory was actually a pretty sound theory. But clearly, from the beginning, well, not from the beginning, from 1964, from the beginning of the suck, America's politicians, I should say, went completely bat guano crazy. They went crazy. And what I mean by that was the way that Johnson fought this war from 1964 until he was defeated by Richard Nixon in 1968 is insane. It's insane. You look at it and you can't believe it actually happened. And to be somebody on the ground or at the point of the spear and having to live through this, honest to God, I don't know how. I don't know how they took it, but that's why it was the suck. Most of this, in fact, virtually all of it, in fact, probably all of it, was due to these political rules of engagement, these political restraints that were put on the soldiers, and by the warriors, by the airmen and the sailors and soldiers, Marines, and so on. And some of these rules of engagement were beyond belief, simply almost beyond belief. It kind of had it harkened back a little bit to what we saw in Korea, where We had specific rules where you could not violate Chinese airspace. MiGs would come from Chinese airspace, fly over, and then if they got back over the Yalu or whatever, we couldn't pursue them. So, yeah, Mobile Moto said rules of lawyer-induced suicide. That's pretty much it. Yes, it's true. John Pershing points out that Johnson wasn't defeated in '68. That's true. Nixon won, but Johnson removed himself from consideration. He didn't actually run. He did very badly in an early primary, and he just said, "I'm out." Anyway, so even in Korea, we had this kind of half in, half out kind of thing. We're attacked by Chinese jets. They call them North Korean jets, but we all know what they were. And they would attack us, and then they would just hop over the river, and we couldn't touch them. So they can go back and forth, and we can't. And for the life of me, I'll never understand this. But the rules of engagement in Vietnam boggle the mind. And undoubtedly, there are many on the ground that I'm not aware of. I know the ones in the air a little better. One of the most specific cases of the rules of engagement in the air had a lot to do with the kind of airplanes they were flying. These are early generation missile carrying fighters, and they were pretty crappy airplanes. American airplanes. The Soviets were building the MiG-15, then the MiG-17 was a better jet, and the MiG-19 was better than that. And the MiG-21 was a really small, very easy to manufacture jet, but it was very agile. And guys like Robert McNamara were speaking on behalf of most of the Pentagon when they thought, no. The answer is just get bigger and bigger, faster, and heavier jets, slap a bunch of missiles on them, and then you won't need to dogfight because you're never going to get into a dogfight. Well, that didn't work out so well. It was going to happen anyway that they were going to get into dogfights, but the rules of engagement said. So just think about this. The U.S. Air Force strategy coming from the Pentagon is, we don't need agile fighter jets because we'll knock them down with missiles. Well, the Sparrow, I don't know what the Sparrow's KP percentage of kills was in Vietnam. I think it's around 10%. So, number one, the missiles that we're going to use to knock down these enemy fighters are not terribly reliable. And here's the part that just makes you just want to just drop your rice bowl. Even though that was the strategy, the rules of engagement said that you couldn't shoot. DP Wellman says less than 2%. You couldn't shoot until you had visually identified them as enemy aircraft. In other words, you couldn't use the missiles until the missiles were useless because you were too close to the enemy jet. Now you're in knife fighting range, and this MiG-21 is going to turn inside you, and down you go. And the Korean War air-to-air kill ratio was 14-1 in favor of the Americans because the F-86 was just a flying wing, and that beast could turn inside anybody. It was flown by World War II pilots who were 5 years out of the war. I mean, the F-86 Sabre was an amazing fighter, lightweight, tough, fast, beautiful airplane. And by the time we get to Vietnam, this whole period in between is bulking these things up, because the Air Force is thinking it's all nuclear bombers. What do we need a tactical Air Force for? And so what you found when you got to Vietnam was you found American, the kill ratio in the air over Vietnam fell to 2-1, and some people argue that it was 1-1. In other words, we were losing an aircraft for every time the enemy lost an aircraft in air-to-air combat. And that is not acceptable. So in this episode, we're going to make a little reference. We're going to get to John Boyd a little later in the episode, and I've been over Boyd many times. I'm not going to go over that now, but John Boyd basically looked at what was happening and said, hey, the reason this is happening is because the Russians have better jets than we do. What? And Boyd and the fighter mafia ended up designing the F-15 and the F-16, as well as the A-10, which I would argue, until we see how the F-22s and F-35s do, I would argue that those three aircraft are the most successful aircraft ever in any Air Force over any time. So here's what happened. The reason that this period was the suck was because Johnson himself, through McNamara, had ordered that these airstrikes that we were launching on, let's say, a Vietnam factory or something inside of Vietnam. The order was that these strikes had to come in. I actually can't believe I'm saying this out loud because it is so crazy to me that I absolutely just hard to believe. I can hardly credit that it actually took place, but apparently it did. First of all, Navy guys coming in from the aircraft carriers off of Yankee Station would fly over Da Nang Harbor and they'd look down and they'd see the SAM missiles that are going to kill them next week being offloaded from these Soviet freighters, and we're not allowed to touch them because we might accidentally kill a Russian if we did that. So the Russians are down there unloading their SAMs, and no, can't touch them. But even worse than that, because you can at least make some kind of political argument about that, not wanting to get into world war with the Soviets. But even worse than that was that when these guys were given targets, they had to come in at the same altitude, the same speed, the same compass heading, and the same time of day. Let me just say that again because it's not possible to believe it's true. They were ordered to come in at the same altitude, the same airspeed, the same direction, and the same time of day, which meant that if airstrike after airstrike after airstrike is coming in, not only could you set up SAMs and anti-aircraft artillery and Vector fighters there, I mean, it's just a matter of time before you just put up big enough nets and just catch the jets. I mean, it's just plain madness. And how these guys in these air crews did it, I do not know. But the reason I set all this up is a couple of people have asked about it in the comments, but this is where I was going the whole time. The reason I set all this up, because this is what I want to talk about, then we'll get into the questions, was because this was so predictable that 2 or 3 years into the suck in 1967, Robin Olds, a colonel in the United States Air Force, pretty sure it was Olds, came up with this thing called Operation Bolo. Now, we'd done these raids with tactical bombers, linebacker and so on. We were just getting murdered. And it was a turkey shoot. It was a turkey shoot for the North Vietnamese, for the bad guys. So, to give you an idea of the quality of the aircraft that we were flying then, the F-105 Thunder Chief was the primary fighter bomber of the war. The F-100 did it as well. The F-100 wasn't a great dogfighter, but the F-105, in my opinion, was one of the worst things we ever put in the air. The F-105 Thunder Chief had two names reliably used by its pilots. They called it either the Thud or the Lead Sled, which give you an idea of how that aircraft performed. It was designed mostly to be an interceptor, go fast in a straight line. And this thing was we would send F-105 Thunder Chiefs in there again and again and again and again and again without any air-to-air capability whatsoever, and just wait for the MiGs to come down and pick them off. Anyway, we have been doing this for so long that it was essentially a feeding time for the North Vietnamese Air Force. It's like, well, here come the Americans, and they don't have any air cover, and they're flying these big, heavy, bulky, slow, well, not necessarily slow, but ponderous kind of bombers that can't turn. And these North Vietnamese aircraft would go in there, and they wouldn't even have to use their missiles. They just use guns. They get inside these things, just shoot them out of the sky. And it went on and on and on and on and on. And finally, you run into a commander who's not only as upset as the rest of the commanders, but has got a plan to do something and somehow got it approved. So we were flying F-105s in on this target, and the F-105s were using the same call sign on the same frequencies, and they'd been doing this for months, just basically handing out cards saying, this is where we'll be when you're ready to shoot us down. So these F-105s are going in there and getting slaughtered. And one day, Robin Olds has this plan. He says, well, I'm getting tired of being ambushed. Maybe it's time to ambush them for a change. That sounds like an interesting idea. So what he did was he took when I say our best air-to-air fighter, was our only air-to-air fighter, was the F-4 Phantom, which I've probably built more Phantom models than anything in the world. I've easily built 30 of them in 1/72nd scale, and I love the Phantom, but the Phantom is not. The Phantom's not the F-86, and it's not the F-16, F-15. The Phantom is the fighter of the suck. My favorite term for the Phantom that pilots called it was they called it the Smoking Thunderhog, which I just love the sound of. They called it the Smoking Thunderhog because these particular jet engines left a big black trail of soot behind them, and it's essentially a black arrow pointing to where the jet is. If, in case you North Vietnamese pilots are not able to see it, we'll put a big black streak across the whole sky, so you've got an arrow pointing to where our jets are. The Smoking Thunderhawk. I didn't know exactly this, but Mobile Moto says it was the first plane that was unstable in all axes. Yeah. Foghorn says we still call it the Rhino. I'd be willing to bet that the Rhino designation came along with the F4E. The first F4s, I think probably the C model, had a pretty short nose. And it was basically a Navy jet. And McNamara said, why buy a number of different jets? Why not just make the Air Force have it? So the Air Force had to take this Navy jet. Twin engine, very heavy fighter. And the first ones had really pretty short nose. And they had no guns, none. It's not like the guns weren't accurate. There was no gun on the airplane. In fact, the only aircraft that had a gun during the first part of the suck in Vietnam, in fact, throughout virtually all of it, was the F-8 Crusader Navy fighters. The only one that had a gun that was worth a damn. So the Phantoms are these big airplanes, but when they got a little more evolved, they stretched the nose quite a bit and cranked it down and put a cannon underneath the nose. And the F-4E was the first one capable of actually shooting back. But this was our best fighter jet. But here's the point. The F-4 was an air-to-air platform. It may have not been terribly agile, but it was fast, and it had pretty good thrust-to-weight ratio compared to some of the North Korean jets like the MiG-21. Jump ahead just a little bit here. When Boyd did his analysis of enemy aircraft versus ours, and he came up with his energy management theory, Boyd said to the Pentagon during his famous briefing, he said, the MiG-21 is a far superior dogfighter to the F-4. How can you say such a thing? We're the Americans. Here's the statistics. Here are the dead pilots. What else do you need? And Boyd figured out, just through sheer mathematics, he said that I'm taking examples here, and I'm not 100% sure they're right, but just bear with me because this is the essence of the argument. Boyd was saying if you run into a MiG-19 and you decide to fight the MiG-19 at less than 350 knots, you're going to die. Because the the MiG-19 will outturn you and shoot you down every single time. You find yourself in the same air with a MiG-19 and you fight them below 350 knots, and you're going to go down. And that's what is happening out there in the real world all the time. But Boyd figured that since these light Russian jets did not have hydraulic assistance controls, they were direct linkage. They were pulling either push-pull rods or cables even. That once you got above 350 knots, even the strongest pilot, using all of his strength, pulling back on the stick, could not turn the jet at a rate that the jet was capable of turning. It was a weakness in the airplane. And that above 350 knots, the hydraulic systems on the Phantom continue to pull G's until the jet comes apart. Or the pilot blacks out, probably the last one. So Boyd said, if you run into I'm condensing the argument, but he says if you run into a MiG-19 out there, you had better get yourself to 350, 400 knots, 450 if you can do it. And if you're going that fast, you will be able to outturn him because the pilot does not have the physical strength to crank that more maneuverable jet around. And sure enough, even though the Pentagon, we want the F-111, which is a flying bus. That's going to be our fighter jet. Somehow the word got back to the guys on the ground out there, and American pilots started doing this, and immediately went from 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 to 7-to-1, just immediately. Anyway, that's later. So back to Bolo. So they've got a day, and they're going to launch another one of these F-105 bombing missions on the same schedule at the same time, coming in from the same direction, using the same call signs, all of this stuff. And Robin Olds said, yeah, we're going to make a little bit of a surprise for them. So what they did was they loaded this entire flight. I don't know, from the pictures, it looks like maybe 20, 30 aircraft, something like that. And instead of sending up the F-105s, which were pigs, and loaded with bombs on top of it. What he did was he put all the air-to-air ordnance he could find on an equal number of F-4s, so no F-105s flew. And the genius of this was, when he took off, he had the F-4s using the same call signs, the same exact call signs that the F-105s had used. And he flew them at F-105 speeds and at F-105 altitudes. And he didn't do anything that the F-105 couldn't do. Unless you were in visual contact with that jet, you would have no way to know that this was not another F-105 strike. They came in exactly the same way they always had, and exactly at the same time with exactly the same call signs. So once again, the North Vietnamese pilots say, hey, here comes lunch. Fantastic. Let's go up and knock down another 5 or 6 American jets. So basically, the entire Vietnamese Air Force is up there feeding on these lead sleds. Only this particular day, they came up, and instead of finding these lumbering, heavy, essentially defenseless F-105s, they found the sky was filled with air-to-air F-4s, and they were in a rather angry mood. And so it was like the greatest air-to-air ambush of all time. My recollection is we shot down 7 or 8 of the enemy aircraft, didn't lose any, and furthermore, 8 aircraft was half of the North Vietnamese Air Force. So, this is not, well, Bolo is clearly something to be proud of. The reason that Bolo worked is because of the suck. Bolo worked because we had given them so many opportunities to shoot down these bombers that they thought it was just another one. But that's no excuse for why Bolo worked. Anyway, so the suck consists of Bolo. The suck consists of Tet, which was a huge defeat for the communists, but reported by Walter Cronkite as the end of the war that we couldn't possibly win. And so that was that. And then when the war ended, they wouldn't come to the table after Tet. Nixon decided to bomb the living daylights out of downtown Hanoi. Next thing you know, they're there ready to talk. The war ends with the North Vietnamese above the border. And while there had been just awful desolation and millions of Vietnamese killed and 52,000 Americans as well, or 58,000, I guess, nevertheless, when we left Vietnam, the situation was the same as when we started Vietnam. So if it's not a win in terms of turning back the invasion, it's certainly a tie at the very least. And then we promised we'd replace anything that the South Vietnamese did. So if they lost a jet, we'd give them a jet. If they lost a helicopter, we'd give them a helicopter. If they fired 15 rounds, we'd give them 15 rounds. And then comes Watergate, which was a big part of the suck. And then the Democrats sweep to power, and they basically just say goodbye to South Vietnam. We're out of here. But you promised. Yeah. But we're Democrats, so it doesn't really matter. So off they went. And then the next thing you know, the Vietnamese start poking to see if the U.S. is going to respond, and we didn't. And then they go marching down into Saigon, which is now Ho Chi Minh City. And you get the elevator on the embassy, which is probably the iconic picture, that last helicopter leaving the U.S. embassy with just streams of people like ants trying to get on it. I think that's the iconic photo for the absolute apex of the suck. And then what happened after that? Well, we were out of there by 72, 73. By 74, we were pretty much right out of there, absolutely demoralized. The country, had already gone through most of the worst of the 60s, and we started to get into the wide decade. That's what James Lilacs called it, the wide decade, when wide lapels, wide ties. This is when I grew up. And it was just... I had a friend named Lee Kolosna, and he said, we were 16, 17 years old, in high school, 11th grade, I want to say, and we were sitting there one night in one of the only other cool things that happened during the 70s, which was one of those custom vans. Those things were awesome. And we were sitting there one night late, just talking as we usually did, and he said, this isn't 1976. He said, you realize that we live in the in the dullest period of history, right? Ever. That this is the most boring time in history. Nothing's going on, and he was right. Vietnam was over, and everybody was demoralized. I had a friend join Air Force Combat Control in 1976, and the military was absolutely downtrodden. Along comes Jimmy Carter, and then the Arab oil embargo, which started before Carter. But instead of Carter doing something about it, he says, well, just set your thermostat for 62 and wear a sweater at home. And then Carter says there's a malaise, there's a strange kind of a depression sitting over America. And most of it was you, Jim. And we had the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, and we had Desert One, this catastrophe. We let the Iranians, go to war with us, overrun our embassy, keep our hostages for 444 days, 52 hostages, 444 days. And here we were, the world's greatest superpower, put man on the moon 5 years ago, and now we can't stop a couple of bearded Islamic lunatics from keeping our guys forever. And so the suck started in 1964 with the Gulf of Tonkin, and the suck didn't end until the first Tuesday in November of 1980. And the official end of the suck was an hour after Reagan was sworn in as president, when the Iranians released the hostages with no conditions, because they were pretty sure that Reagan and Haig weren't going to be the same as Jimmy Carter. And that was the end of the suck. So that's what I'm working on now. It was nice to be able to talk about it, get a little more clear on it, but as far as I know, I'm the only person to define this period not only as the suck, but and I'm not claiming credit for this because I'm sure 200 historians have already done it already, but it seems to me that from 1964 until 1980 was the absolute nadir of U.S. morale and U.S. capability, and then Ronald Reagan, like that. Here come our hostages, and air traffic controllers are threatening to go on strike. Well, they're not allowed to. Well, they just went on strike. Well, they're fired, and on and on and on. So I contend that there really was kind of two Cold Wars. Cold War I was 1948 Berlin airlift up until let's say the end of the Vietnam War in mid-suck. And then the second, the Soviets went through their own suck, by the way, because the late 60s to through all the 70s was Leonid Brezhnev, who was a child. And that's when Soviet society completely stagnated. They kept building conventional forces. And we kept trying to, kind of gild the lily and make better and better stuff because we didn't have the money or the means or the manpower to put out that many of all of those things. So anyway, yeah, Dave Booty points out that the Miracle on Ice was part of the ending of the suck. It's 1980 Olympics, was it? Must have been. Where the bunch of American college kids beat the biggest professional hockey team in the world, which was the Red Army hockey team. Things started picking up. The next thing you know, Reagan's president, and the next thing you know, we're back in business, and walking tall again. And there's a Charlie Daniels song that doesn't get played much anymore called In America. And it's like, you never did think this would, you never did think that we'd ever get together again. Well, we damn sure fooled you, walking real loud and we're talking real proud again. And I was there for that. I saw it. I saw the whole thing. And that song was very popular. So anyway, it's good for me to talk about one episode at a time as I get into it because it, like I say, helps clarify where I'm going and what I'm doing. But I really am fond of this. I thought about it. I thought of the title, Welcome to the Suck, for Vietnam for 3 months ago. But lately, as in like half an hour before the show started, I said, why don't we just call this whole period the suck? And I love it. I think it's really cool. So anyway, sorry about that. Onward and upward. Let's see what we can. Let's see what we may find in the depths of the internet. Oh, one last thing while I'm looking. For those of you, and I think we can all agree that I have not misused this much lately. There was a period when all I was talking about was Star Citizen, but I've tried very hard to kind of, just sort of back off on that a little bit. So anyway, just as a quick note, for those of you who are not able to join us on the cruise, in Star Citizen, this latest patch, this latest output of Star Citizen, really is starting to get to be the first playable thing. And our friends Foghorn and known miscreant, sometimes shows up as Times Judge or Chandran or whatever here in the Stratosphere Lounge. I know the three of us who really started this organization, and clearly the two of them done all the work since I designed the website, the graphics, and wrote the stuff. But from that moment, Foghorn's done weekly instructional videos for the last 2 years now, and so on. Anyway, it's really taken off. We've got more. I think we got, what is it, Foggy? We got more than 160 now. I want to say a little over 160. Memberships. Enrollment in the org has gone way up fast, and we've got a lot of Stratosphere Lounge people in there now, and we're at the point now where we really would love to get people who don't particularly care about being fighter pilots or anything. They're people who maybe want to get into, even like trade and accounting, that kind of thing. Just a quick invitation, just to tell you that that we were really starting to have some fun there again. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so back to where we were. Let's have a look. I can't. I should just be so ashamed of myself. I cannot find this link to this page. We have a members only page at billwhittle.com, and I'm trying to find the link. I think it might have been texted to me, but that means I probably can't get it. Just bear with me here. Talk amongst yourselves. This is part of the high level of pre-production that goes into this astonishing program. Let me see if I know Scott sent it to me somewhere. Where are you, buddy? Well, I'm going to keep looking, and if somebody can help me find it, that'd be great. And if not, I'm going to have to once again, apologize for this really kind of silliness. Okay, we'll go to Facebook, and I'll keep poking around trying to find that members only page we have for the Stratosphere Lounge. But until then, let me go to Facebook and see what's going on. Come on, Bill. This really is kind of embarrassing. Here we go. If you think that Dead Air feels bad when you're watching it, the only consolation I can possibly give you is that if you do have to go through moments like Dead Air when you're looking for a link, because I've seen other people do it every now and then, it is excruciating to just be like, can somebody, please get me what I need here? Come on. Here we go. All right. So let's see what we have here on the Facebook page. Wow. That's kind of shocking news. Give me a second. Come on. Here we go. All right. Sorry about the delay. So the first thing I see here before I even open up the questions is Eric Blake, who I do not recall seeing in the comment section this week, which is unusual. Eric said, hey, Bill, just so you know, I got severely injured right after Christmas, so I'm currently in recovery. Hopefully I'll be able to participate next time. Good Lord, man. Why didn't you say so? Earlier. We gotta do something for our boy here. When I say do something, I mean we gotta send him cards and letters or something like that. Can't have Eric Blake sitting there in the hospital or whatever without being pestered by Stratosphere Lounge people. So maybe you can drop a note on how we can reach you there, and we'll see what happened. Top fan Steve Young says episode 241, which I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I just forgot to put up. Says that episode 241 didn't kill itself. I don't know about Epstein. 241 did not kill itself. 241 got lost in the shuffle. So we will get that done tomorrow. We'll put this one up tonight. Let's see. Travis Anderson, who's going on the Stratus cruise? If not, what's your excuse? I guess that's for other people. Things are really selling really pretty well. We really are. We're selling this thing out pretty fast. We're not selling it out, but we're selling it well. It's doing well. And the more we talk about it, the more fun we're going to have. I'm really looking forward to it. Scott's looking forward to it. Steve's looking forward to it. My wife Natasha's going to be there, and she's going to be taking pictures of people, and probably do a Natasha only session where you get to ask the questions you've always want to ask. So if you're not on the cruise, I know most of you by now are either in or out, but it's still there. It's still pretty reasonable down payment. I think you got to middle of February to pay for it. And I know, look, I'm not privy to your financial situation, nor do I want to be, but I was surprised when I found out it was $800 for 3 nights all inclusive and stuff. So it's not a super bad price if those things go. And we're going to be updating live. The cruise organization helps take care of that. And if you're able to go, you don't want to be watching us having the time of our lives and then say, why didn't I go? As I've said before, if you feel like I don't know anybody out there, I'm not going to know anybody on the boat. No, au contraire, Pierre. You know everybody on the boat. You just don't know that you know them yet. So anyway, we're going to have ourselves a fine old time. It's going to be grand. Let's see, going down. Steve Young says, is President Trump's legacy written in pencil? They're all executive orders except for the judiciary appointments. Well, just the judiciary appointments are indelible ink as far as I'm concerned. That's practically chiseled. And the economy is booming. So, that wealth that's been generated isn't going anywhere. I think... I look, 2 things. First of all, don't get cocky, kid, because God himself could not take away this victory from Donald Trump in 2020. That's not what I want to say. But I personally think it looks very good, if for no other reason, just the weakness of the competition. But I think he's gonna win big. And if he does, then that'll mean at least 1 more, probably 2 more Supreme Court picks. And most people don't know this, but Trump is appointing federal judges, and Mitch McConnell is doing it too. Let no seat go unfilled. I forget what the actual numbers were. I want to say that Obama did something like 80 or something, and Trump has done 500. I don't know. It's something like that. It's just really amazing. So I don't think his legacy is going anywhere. I just love watching him undo everything that the left has done. And I'm going to stay away from it this time because I talk about it too much, but probably next week we'll come back again to this cultural thing. People don't want progressivism. Every single time they get the progressive message, they simply, the American public says, I'm going to walk away. And it's one thing to walk away from razor blades. Gillette comes out with we ought to be better than we are, and, that whole anti-man thing. They lost $8 billion because of that one commercial. $8 billion. And a lot of people are saying the brand's never going to recover. I think it's probably true. And I don't think it deserves to recover either. That's what you get for get woke, go broke. But the whole pop culture is walking away from the things they love. Then we're not going to take your progressive Terminator, not going to take your progressive Ghostbusters, not going to take your progressive Star Trek, we're not going to take your progressive Star Wars, we're not going to take any of it. Doctor Who, it's dead to me. I don't know if anybody else besides me really understands how unbelievably important this is. It's unbelievably important. It basically is saying, I told you I wouldn't go here, now I am going here. It basically is saying that even when they have the ability, like that parasite wasp, to embed their philosophy into something that people love so that it will hatch inside them and grow, people would rather walk away from Star Wars than endure woke wars. That's awesome. What I'm saying here is, if you can't sell progressivism through Star Wars and Star Trek, then you can't sell it. You just can't. You can't do it. And it's like people have a fundamental inoculation against these ideas that I didn't know was there until 2-3 years ago. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling really good. That's one of the reasons why this cruise is going to be so much fun. Anyway, let's see. Brian's, I'm just going to read them. I can't really do those. I'm just going to read them. I remember Brian Sment, sorry, Brian, says, I remember hearing you were selling the Long Easy, wondering if you've done much flying lately. After nearly 3 years, I just passed my instrument check ride today. Brian, congratulations. It wasn't the most fun part of my flying career, but it was without question the biggest achievement. Learning to fly is tough, and knowing what you need to learn for the rules to learn to fly is tough. But learning to fly with the windows painted over is real tough. And I'm convinced that the instrument rating I got was the biggest. Wasn't certainly not the best thing that ever happened to me, but it was probably the toughest thing I ever did, I would say. Yeah. And so passing your getting your instrument rating is awesome. I haven't flown really in the last 3.5 years. I flew for about a 6-month period after Natasha came into my life, but since then, I have just not had the desire. The reason I sold the plane was because it was sitting there for 4 months. So I've said before, and I can't explain this. I think maybe other pilots can understand it, but if you're not, I don't think you can. People say, do you miss flying? It's like, no, I've flown everywhere that you can fly from Southern California. I don't miss flying. I miss being a pilot. But I guess I'll always be a pilot. There's no expiration date on my pilot's license, so yeah, that's that. Matthew Lloyd, that's some kind of made-up name, obviously. If the Strata cruise goes well, would you consider other kinds of group trips, perhaps a cruise down the French Riviera, a tour of Italian wine country, Bill Whittle visits Japan, etc.? If this cruise does human contact sold the plane, yeah. Bill actually met another human being, and it's actually truer than you might believe. It was really, I had the piece of plastic because I didn't have Natasha, but yeah, I'd love to keep doing them. In fact, if this thing continues to sell as well as it does, I'm thinking we might schedule another one for November, right after the election, to either drown our sorrows and just open the seacocks on the bottom of the boat and just scuttle it with us on board saluting, or more likely, hopefully, having ourselves a big old celebration party, which will be especially well appreciated by whatever liberals may be on board if it's 3 days after the election and Trump wins. So I'd love to do some more of these things. And I think that, I think the best selling point for the cruise will be people watching what happened on the cruise. This one is kind of a, it's more than proof of concept. We're just really guns blazing happy about this. But I think when people see how much fun we have and the group pictures and all the rest of it, I think that'll definitely sell the next one. So we're planning to do a bunch of them. So let's see. John Rasmussen wants to know about last week's submarine episode. Already mentioned that it was my fault, and I will get on that directly tomorrow. Let's see. Matthew Lloyd again. That can't be real. I mean, the name has two. It has like the last name has two consonants back to back, and it leads off the word. It's probably a gag. Gun owners in Virginia are having their rights attacked by a governor who has gone so far as to threaten to call in the National Guard to confiscate weapons. Good luck with that. I'm looking forward to seeing how well that goes. These gun owners are marching on the state capitol but have been forbidden by the governor to carry firearms. Do you think this warrants civil and peaceful disobedience, or do you think that it's still time to comply with an unjust government? This is time to comply with an unjust government command. He does not have the right to tell you that you can't carry firearms because the governor of Virginia does not exceed the Constitution of the United States. The carry permit is the Second Amendment. Of course, you should march on the Capitol. And if you have the whole thing is just so unbelievable anyway. If you've got a carry permit, open or concealed, what are they going to do? They can't. He can't. He just can't do it. So, I think whenever people do things like that and really elevate it to the point where it's really clearly visible, instead of working underneath the radar, when a guy comes out and says, we're going to take all your guns whether you like it or not, and if you bring a gun, if you wear a gun outside in the streets or anywhere in Virginia, we're going to take it away from you. Good. Now we know what you're all about, and you are about to determine, you're about to encounter what people actually feel about guns. We did a segment on Right Angle this last week on this lovely piece of work. Was it Jurek or something? The Bernie Sanders supporters who was talking about, killing Republicans and sending everybody to re-education camps and all the other things were going to happen when Bernie finally takes over. And my entire take on that was, you want to know why we've got guns? This is why we have guns. We've got people openly advocating the murder and the incarceration of people who they disagree with politically. And so hard to imagine that it's coming from the left. So anyway, that's that. Yes, of course you should get out there and do it. And you should do it now, and you should do it, peacefully. And I think that's exactly what you need. These people need to see that people don't want what they're selling. They just need to know it. Let's see. Dave Olson, we all know that you've been doing a lot of research on the Cold War, but let's talk about the war before that. Is it valid to think of it as one long war which started in Sarajevo in 1914 and ended in Tokyo Bay in 1945 with an artificially extended halftime? Bonus question, as the losers, Germany really takes the punch for starting the first part of that war. Do the English and the other Allied powers deserve a larger share of the blame than they traditionally get? Well, since Germany went to war first in both cases, it's kind of hard for me to put the blame on other people. Sometimes get into this argument, with people as well. The United States meant this and that. It's like, who crossed a border with a rifle? Who shot first? It's important. It's important who shot first, and for the reason it's important to me anyway. That because if you can determine who shot first, you can determine guilt or innocence, and guilt or innocence is a condition rather, that I don't think is meaningless, despite the left's best efforts to get me to agree to that. A lot of people have said, when did that war start? And you can go back and forth with it. And I almost opened the Cold War thing with this. Did it begin in 1914? It is what it is. And was it a 25-year hiatus or whatever between the two? You really do have to call those two different wars. If you look at Imperial Germany in 1914 versus Nazi Germany in 1939, they're not the same state. And if it's not the same state, it really can't be the same war. So Sorry to put that in such a nutshell, but that's all I got to say about that one. I'm going to have to run pretty quick here. I hate to do 3 of these, especially considering the source, but sometimes you have to make compromises of quality. Matthew Lloyd says, should we have required cognitive tests for members of Congress over a certain age? I actually 100% think that we should. I'm utterly convinced that Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden, at least those two, are mentally incompetent. They do not have the mental capacity to fully execute the duties of their office. I'm 100% sure about that. Now, I'm 100% sure of it in Biden's case anyway. But when you hear Nancy Pelosi just getting up there and she doesn't get to claim, I was nervous. I mean, she's been destroying the republic for 30 years now. It's not like it's new to her. She had the job, she lost the job, and then she basically wanted the job back. Johnny the Frost in the comment section just posted on Norm Macdonald on Germany. If you haven't heard it yet, it is so brilliant. It's so good. He put a link in the comment section, but if you're watching this on Facebook, you just Google Norm Macdonald on Germany. I love Norm Macdonald. I love him, and I think that's just really going to be great. Yes, of course they should have some kind of cognitive test, and I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. And I think the president should have one as well, and the vice president, and the Speaker of the House, and majority and minority leaders for both houses. That's as far as I'd go with it. I'll do a couple more. Is open mic related to hot mic? Ted Bizzle asks. They're actually cousins. Ted. Hot mic is older, but open mic spent a lot of time with hot mic, and I guess he just didn't like what he saw. He just found him to be a little arrogant, a little more, pushy and narcissistic and self-centered, because he is, So open mic just kind of hippied out a little bit, I guess, and just started, talking about his feelings and, what he's eating for breakfast, and here's how much money I'm making this year, and he's kind of got all gooey and kind of as nasty as Hot Mike was. But yeah, they're cousins, and they're both named after their grandfather, Mike. Old Mike. When he was young, he was quite a tiger. That grandfather, they called him Live Mike when he was a kid. Moving on. What's going on with this? Light's on its way out. Oh, that's interesting. Can you talk about the way President Trump handled the Soleimani strike in light of my 2012 speech, when I basically said, "You want to war Iran? You want to play this game? We got lots of missiles." Can you talk about the way our president, from the pop culture, who's proud of his own story, showed Iran he wasn't dicking around? Yeah, Cameron. I think. While certainly the strike on Soleimani was precisely the kind of thing I was talking about doing, make it cost them. If you keep hitting, like, if I walk up to Mike Tyson and keep bopping him on the ear and punching him in the nose, then I can beat up Mike Tyson. Only because Mike Tyson's not doing anything about it. I can swing a baseball bat into his face. I put the weapons aside. I can get on his back and start pounding him on the face. I can use little girly punches. I can hit him as hard as I want to. I can do all of these things. And Mike Tyson's attitude is, you really can't hurt me, but, you can bloody his nose and stuff. The second Mike Tyson decides to fight back with me, it's over. I'm done. So make it count. Make it hurt. And to me, that didn't happen with the Soleimani strike. To me, that was pretty clear on, was it the second day of his presidency, when he launched that fuel air explosive, mother of all bombs, on a target that probably didn't need quite that much firepower. We've gone from warning them hey, we're coming. You got a 45-minute warning because President Obama says it's not fair to attack you without warning you. He would have been an excellent Vietnam president. Yeah, somebody mentioned this in the comment section an hour ago. Was Barack Obama's 8 years sucked too? Probably, yeah. Yep. But when they after the Soleimani strike, I thought, okay, they're probably going to do something nasty. And a lot of people say you shouldn't poke around because they have sleeper cells in the United States. And to which I reply, look, this may be true, and they may actually be activated, but honest to God, who wants to live like that? I mean, who's comfortable living like that? What kind of coward do you have to be to say, yeah, well, they've got a gun pointed at you, and so we better do everything they say from now on. It's like, yeah, or get it over with, take your shot, and that'll be the end of it. And I don't think that shot would go as well as they expect it might. But anyway, yeah, it's really reassuring to see a president doing that, and the thing that was necessary for that to happen, given the climate, is that he had to have the skin of a rhinoceros. And I have to say, Trump's response to the Baghdad embassy was even more than I called for. You want to talk about taking the 3 a.m. call. This is, what did he send? Is 100 helicopters or something? 10,000 guys. Anyway, it was something. Yeah, I mentioned in that speech, I said, if you attack a military guy and kill an American soldier, you're going to lose an installation. If you attack American civilians in the U.S., you lose all of your installations, because we can. Iran's strength has been that they're both a state and a terrorist organization. And they try to accomplish most of their political international objectives through terrorism. And as long as you're playing against suckers, that'll work. Because if you're playing against idiots, I'm not going to mention any presidents, but let's just say that the one I have in mind, last name ends in a vowel. If I just completely lost my train of thought. What the hell was I saying? I was going back to Trump anyway. In order to do this, you have to have thick skin, because I've talked before about social proof and the power of social proof, and it wasn't until relatively recently that I realized that social proof is a very powerful force, and it always has been. Mark Twain talked about the power of social proof, but social media is essentially a lever that magnifies the power of social proof by orders of magnitude. So in other words, if people could humiliate you before, or kind of bully you into being quiet before, just by being around you and threatening it with your friends, then social media is able to put far more pressure on you. And when you combine that with the mainstream media, anything that Trump does is going to be absolutely dissected and demonized, and you have to have unbelievably thick skin to do it. I don't have that kind of skin. I got nothing like that kind of skin. Nothing. And that's the kind of calluses you get when you've been in New York real estate for 50 years. Yeah, I'm very pleased to see it. And my argument in 2012, that was 8 years ago. If you told me it was 2018 right now, I'd still say, no, it can't possibly be. Anyway, the argument was that the reason it would take somebody from the pop culture to be able to be that strong would be because only somebody from the pop culture would know how to defeat the news media. And that's really important. And CP Tome says something here that's really, really big. Oh, I remember what I was saying. I was going to say a second ago. I thought they were going to attack the homeland or set up something. But when they lobbed some missiles which landed in Iraq, I don't know how many of them, none of them killed any of our personnel. I don't even know how many of them hit the base. But in any event, the Iranian missile attack had a 100% success rate of striking in Iraq, somewhere in the country. Um, and when they said, that's it, we're square, I thought, really? First of all, I don't really believe them. But if they're saying we're square, we killed hundreds of Americans with our missiles, that doesn't sound like somebody who wants to continue the fight. You know, that sounds to me like somebody who's like looking for a way to save face. And the thing you have to understand about the Soviets and the Iranians and all the rest of these bastard regimes around the world all throughout history is that their primary concern is not looking tough in front of their enemies abroad. Their primary concern is maintaining that level of fear among their own people. Um, uh, that's what they have to worry about. They have to worry about maintaining that sense of fear over their own people, which is accomplished by convincing them that you're infallible. And as C.P. Thomas pointed out, I think it was C.P. Thomas, there was a picture just came out a couple days ago of the American and Israeli flags on the streets, painted on the streets so that the Iranians could walk over them, and they're going around them. That regime's on its last legs. That act alone, just that alone, is unbelievable, really, and tells you how sick people are. And they should be sick of these guys, the same way you should be sick of progressives. The problem with these with this Islamic Sharia is the same as the problem with progressivism. It is no fun at all. There's no fun in the world. Fun has to be absolutely stamped out. You can't have happy people and rule them by fear. You just can't. So in Islam, you're not allowed to dance, you're not allowed to hold hands, not allowed to kiss, not allowed to date, not allowed to do any of that stuff. And same thing in progressivism, as it turns out. Um, and nobody wants it. And even if you wrap it up in Star Wars, nobody wants it. We win. The culture war's over. We win. Because you cannot change human nature. You can't beat the biology out of people. And that's just absolutely amazing. So, anyway, there's that. Let's see. Martin Archer says, have I seen the feature-length Armstrong documentary, which came out last year just before the... Yes, I did. It was excellent. It was excellent. It's apparently coming out... Oh. Yeah, I thought it was absolutely great. And if you haven't seen it, you definitely should go see it. It was terrific. Um, so finally he got a little bit of the credit he deserves. That feature film was just absolutely appalling. All right, I want to just answer one more from John Frost here. It's just the next one on the list. How about a taste of what your State of the Union address would sound like? I'm assuming that means today. Damn propriety and decorum, no holds barred, no quarter given or taken. Could you please release the hound of cultural war so we can witness the power of our fully operational virtual president? Thank you. I've been getting more and more convinced of this, that it's actually time to go on the cultural offensive. I know that sounds kind of... It's always time to go on the offensive, but I don't think you could have pulled it off until now. I think people need just to stand up and basically, since you want to hear it, it's not rehearsed, but basically what I would say is the days of the good, decent, tolerant people in this country having their lives run by the craziest people in the country are over. Those days are over. We're happy to be accommodating, but we are no longer going to run this entire society according to the whims of the most hysterical people in it. Those days are over. If you don't like the fact that there's a nativity scene in the town square, then I almost said I'm sorry, but I'm not. That nativity scene was in that place when you moved in because it's been there for 150 years. And if you don't like it, you shouldn't have moved there. And furthermore, if you want to put up a display of your flying spaghetti monster on your own property, you're absolutely, certainly able to do that. You don't need my permission for it. But the days of the sane people being corralled by the guilt induced by crazy people is over. It's done. The race card is done. The victim card, it's overdrawn. We had to tear it up. Had to cut it with a pair of scissors. We are not gonna. It's not a question we're not going to take it anymore. We're just not going to do it anymore. That's it. We're done. Men cannot run. Biological males, and how do we determine this? We can do this very simply. If you have a Y chromosome, you don't get to run in the same race as people who don't. That's it. Period. And I'm sorry if this hurts the feelings of one or two people, or 10 or 100, but hurting people's feelings is not a way to run the world, because if I had the power that you wanted, none of you would be able to say a word, because everything you say hurts my feelings. No, it's over. We're not going to do it anymore. We're not gonna do it. I did this thing on the nurse, what's her name thing, where she said the best way to remain free of sexually transmitted diseases is to wait until marriage. She was called a hater, needless to say, an awful person, and so on. She's just speaking the truth. And then she took down the segment and apologized, and that was the mistake. Because when you apologize, it's they win, and you reward them. I have an example of this in my life. I have a cat I like that I love very much named Bean, and he has diabetes. We found out about this quite a while ago, and that means he has to get a shot twice a day. Now, Bean, I got from the shelter, and he had been one of like 25 or 30 cats with a crazy woman. So Bean and I are really close, but he does not like being cornered or in any. He's not. He's a little neurotic when it comes to that. So I realized that the only way to get the shot into him twice a day was to have a place where I would give him special treats, because he loves those things, because he didn't get enough food either. He had to fight for his food all the time, that poor Bean. And I put a regular place down, and I would give him some special treats, and while he was eating the special treats, I'd give him the shot. Because in the first couple of weeks, I had to hold on to him, and he's digging his rear claws, 2 inches into my thighs. So I decided to do it this way. And now he starts knocking on the door and waking us up at 5 o'clock in the morning because he wants his special treats. And this is called spoiling people. That's basically what we're doing. We're spoiling the crazies by letting them have their way all the time. I love the fact that this country is so unusual and weird and different, and my wife points it out to me every day. She's even fonder of it than I am. I genuinely do. I think it's a great country that can build jet-powered outhouses and all of it, even the stuff on the other side. But the idea that the majority of people, the vast majority of people, have to do what they say, otherwise we're bad people, I would just come out and say, this is just a lie, and everybody knows it. We're not bad people. We're just tired of being told what to do by people who are nuts. And that's the part you have to do. You can't just come out and say, just friends and the differently abled and all of this. No, you just got to come out and say we're no longer going to govern society in accordance with what the people who are the nuttiest in the country tell us that they want. We're not going to do it. We'll do everything we can to be inclusive and decent and all that, but we already did that. And we put your special treats down to help take away the sting of the needle, and now you want them all the time. So no, not going to happen. That's what I would do. And I am seeing so many signs out there that this thing is not. You get this. What's it called? A preference cascade, where as more and more and more examples of conservative ideas are raised despite the headwind, it becomes more and more acceptable for an individual to express those things, and that makes it more and more likely, which means it happens more and more often, which means it's more likely, and it's just a tipping point. And I'm seeing them everywhere. everywhere when they do Mandalorian and they do Ghostbusters to try and make it up to the fans. There in Rise of Skywalker, which was appalling, it was the corporate side decided to ruin the other half of the thing that the progressive side had ruined. In any event, when Ricky Gervais got up in front of those people, this is important. And some of the people who I listen to, I got to tell you about one guy I've just heard all I'm just absolutely crazy about. When Ricky Gervais got up there, and it's just unheard of in 2008. It's unheard of in 2016. But people have had enough. And I mean, they've had enough across the board, had enough. And even the guys who do nothing but talk about Star Wars they're not just saying we don't want this stuff, but they're saying what the real point of it is. They're saying it's so old and tired and nobody wants it. This was in regard to Picard, Star Trek Picard, which by all accounts is only happening because oh my Lord God, because Patrick Stewart is so opposed to Brexit and Trump that he agreed to come back to Star Trek, on the condition that he would be a producer on the show and be responsible for the kind of content. He got the original showrunner fired. So Star Trek Picard is not going to be anything like the Picard from Next Generation. Star Trek Picard is going to be a 78-year-old guy lecturing us on what we should think. And it's going to tank. And yeah, and Doomcock, he's awesome. Doomcock was basically saying, if you haven't seen him, by the way, he's awesome. He's fantastic. He's mostly a pop culture critic, but the thing about Doomcock is, because he's the future ruler of the Earth, and since he transmits his message from the center of the planet right in front of his gigantic antimatter reactor, he has a kind of authority that I don't. And this cheesiness, by the way, is awesome. I can give you 3 examples of things that I've seen that not only have bad production values but celebrate them. It's not exactly a political revolt. This is more of a stylistic revolt against production, and I think it's because in order to have production values, you have to have money. That's why this show looks so good. And so what they've done is content providers now they're not only making fun of the fact that they don't have production values, they're glorying in it. Doomcock has a mask that's made out of cardboard, and he's been doing a lot of videos, and it's starting to get a little shaggy. And he doesn't do anything about it because it is ridiculous. It's so ridiculous that you have to worship him. He's the reason Doomcock is the future ruler of planet Earth is because he says he is, and he says so with his helmet and his uniform on. Critical Drinker is great. There's a guy who's I'm not so much into in terms of delivery, but he's got some excellent points on named Nerderotic. I watch his stuff frequently. But I have to tell you, I now have a new favorite, and I've binge watched probably 60 of them. And I'm tempted to include it, but if I do, I'm going to run into the same copyright issues as I did with Azorian on the last one. If you haven't seen this, they're brilliant. But there's a guy's got a website called Screen Rant, and he does something called a pitch meeting. And in the pitch meeting, he plays the writer who comes into the studio to pitch idea for a movie to the studio executive, also played by him, simply in reversals with Literature Devil's great too. Here he is against one green screen background. Here's the reversal. But the thing about this guy is that he'll take a movie that we've seen. He'll go back to he'll do the pitch meeting for Aliens or for films that were made 15, 20, 30 years ago. And what he does is he comes in and says, and the genius of this actually is, and I've been listening to so much of this, I've been thinking about this quite a lot lately, is that in his in his 5 or 6 minute pitch meeting things, it's all the format's always the same. This writer comes in to pitch an idea for a movie like Ghostbusters or whatever, and then the studio executive, who's an idiot also, it says, well, if they do that, then shouldn't this have happened? And all of the plot holes, all of the immediately obvious things that are there when you read a script like that critically, he brings them up with that, and then the writer guy just says, nah, not going to be a problem. And the thing about this guy is that he's got probably in any one of these 5 or 6 minute pitch meetings, I think he's probably got five running gags. They're almost catchphrases. Every single one of these episodes will have at least one of them, and almost always all five of them. They're little transactions, and because he doesn't amplify them, because he plays them as straight as he did when he first introduced them, they still work with me. They just get me to laugh, and I want a T-shirt. One of them is won't it be difficult for to explain how Palpatine survived the explosion of the Death Star, and I said, no, it'll be super easy, barely an inconvenience. That's in every one of the episodes. And all of these little dynamics are in all of these episodes. You know, did you forget to pay that off? I guess I did. Whoops, whoopsie. It just every single time it comes back, it makes me happy. It doesn't just make me laugh. It makes me feel good, because there's something about this kind of repetition. It is without question. It's the same dynamic that drove nightmares like the catchphrase sitcoms. Hey, Fonzie would come out and the audience would go nuts. And after a while, if he doesn't come out and start with "hey," then they're shattered. And this guy, when I listen to his pitch meetings and point out because it's not just fun. If it was just fun, you'd get tired of it. It's deep and fun. He takes the scripts apart the same way that Critical Drinker or Red Letter Media does, and he will bring to your conscious mind, Dynamite, there's another one, there's a bunch of them. He'll bring to your conscious mind how stupid this story really is, the kind of plot holes that are really there. He did one on Shazam, which I like quite a bit. I know Zach pretty well, actually. I used to spend a lot more time with him than haven't seen him in a while, but he's a great guy. And in that movie, you find out that he's abandoned by his mother. They go to the mother's got no money. They go to like Coney Island or something, and she sees that she's left the kid alone, and he's gone to the cops. The cops are going to take care of him, and the mother decides that she's going to let the cops take care of him because she can't. And then so she just abandons her child, and then the producer says, "What do you mean? Just lets him go with the cops? Things don't work like that. What do you mean? Did the cops not think of checking her address or where she lives? Did they not try to make an effort to find out who the mother was? No, they just basically just took him. Oh, okay then. Why don't they look for this guy's mother? I don't know. Okay." It's just, I'm really just mashing it, but it's brilliant. In fact, it's so brilliant that it gave me an idea of something I'd like to do when I get done with the Cold War thing. And that is steal it, just rip it off. Where you basically ask a question and then answer your own question. And it's the pace, the editing, it's like machine gun bullets. There's no delay at all, nothing. It just goes 5 or 6 minutes. And I thought, you could probably do this where I could have me as me, and then I could have a reversal of me with the Bernie hair on, and glasses and a Che T-shirt, and it would be somebody trying to explain socialism, Yeah, so we're gonna have everybody's gonna work and get paid the same. What about the people who don't work? They get paid the same too. So why would I work if I get the same pay as when I'm not working? Because you believe in the idea. The idea that everybody's working. So I'm going to believe in the idea that everybody has to work in order to work for no pay. This kind of thing, you get it. I'm really thinking about doing it. I think it'd be a fun way to look at some foundational things is to start with, I'm heading to TikTok, is just start with their premise, not our premise. Start with their premise and make them explain. Yeah, goatee would be great. I'll look like Malibu Trotsky. Make them explain their philosophy, and then ask them the logical questions that you would ask when, as this guy does when he examines any particular movie script, and just leave it to people. It's like, that's not how things work, and point it out. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Anyway, I've got some writing to do and some other things. I'm going to do a little work on the character stuff, get some of that software reinstalled. So I'm going to wrap this one up. I will upload this one right away, and I will get to fixing the sub issue tomorrow. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, man. So I guess that'll do it. Sorry if I missed your questions. I know it's frustrating, but there it is. We offer a full refund for the program. Not for members, obviously, but you get the idea. Anyway, yeah, it's time for me to go. I got a lot of stuff I have to do. You know, I usually I don't get to sleep much before 2 in the morning as a general rule, and 2 or 3 days a week I have to be here in the chair at 7:30. So over the course of a week or so, that's a pretty big sleep debt. But anyway, I'm going to try and get some of this stuff done. So as always, thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this possible. If you're not one, we could certainly use your help. And really looking forward to the cruise. So we're going to see a lot of the people who watch the show live, and a lot of other people too out there. And if you're worried you don't know anybody, you're just going to be your chance to go out and meet your best friends in the whole world who you have not been introduced to yet. But that's going to be fun too. So that's at BillWhittleCruise.com. That'll do it for this edition of the Stratosphere Lounge. Again, made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com. And I imagine that we will see you next week right here at the same bat time and same bat station.